Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss everything in the world of fantasy football. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Anthony.
And we're back again. So we've been like 3 weeks since the season ended, Anthony?
2 weeks.
2 weeks? I don't know. It seems longer.
So you had the Super Bowl. So it's 2 weeks.
Man, it seems so long ago that...
It does seem like a long time ago.
It seems so long. I think it's because... I think it's because I do the football show every day, and then, we still do it on a daily basis. So I think that's why it feels so long.
Right.
But, this is the fantasy show, and, a lot of things that happen in the offseason will impact fantasy value on certain players. But we're going to start today's show talking about Adrian Peterson and where we think he might land, or if the Minnesota Vikings will keep him. Well, earlier this week on this show, I talked about the Giants cutting Rashad Jennings and Victor Cruz. I did talk about Paul Perkins from a fantasy standpoint and how it increases his value. Well, Adrian Peterson took to Twitter and says, the Giants have been making some interesting moves. So with Adrian Peterson tweeting about the Giants' quote-unquote interesting moves, maybe there's a possibility that the New York Giants and Adrian Peterson could get some mutual interest there.
Right, because that was the thing people wanted to be. They want Adrian Peterson because he's probably not going to be in Minnesota, right?
No.
There's enough of a cap hit with him. He's been injured the last few seasons. He's had other stuff going. He's basically probably not going to be with the Vikings after this. So they're like, oh, okay, cool. Let's see where he goes. And then you have this. All he says is the Giants have been making some interesting moves. That's all he said. He didn't say, I would like to play there. This team is great. He just said interesting moves, but we're so, hungry for something like that. We're just oh, he's moving. Let's go. This is going to be great. But, he might also go to the Steelers or the, Packers or something like that. He might go to a team like that. The Giants, I wouldn't be opposed to. I mean, it'd be kind of a nice move, would it?
Yeah, it would. I actually would like to see that.
Right, yeah, because, you got the quarterback, whatever you want to say about Eli Manning. The man also does have 2 Super Bowl rings to beat Tom Brady, the only person that's ever beaten Tom Brady in a Super Bowl, oddly enough. And you got the wide receiver with... Victor Cruz leaving, but you still got Odell Beckham Jr. down there. So offensively, if he goes there and he's anywhere close to Adrian Peterson, you would assume that, that'd be a solid offense, and the defense was looking pretty good last year, kind of one of the strengths of the team. So that would be a nice way to kind of round out the whole thing. But
with Adrian Peterson, hypothetically, going to the Giants, he would be a huge upgrade from Rashad Jennings. And Adrian Peterson hardly ever played last year.
Right.
So that should tell you the type of year that Rashad Jennings had. I did talk about Paul Perkins. And
sure.
If Adrian Peterson does sign, hypothetically, with the New York Football Giants, Paul Perkins' fantasy value will be more diminished than I thought it would be. Because I kind of thought Paul Perkins would be the guy there.
Sure, which, makes sense, because he was the backup and he still had almost 500 yards last year, did some kind of good things towards the end of the year. It was something that looked like he could build towards him.
Yeah, and can you imagine a team with Adrian Peterson? And I know all these guys are getting up there in age, but Adrian Peterson is 31 years old. I still think in the right system, the right team, he can still be productive. But, you got Adrian Peterson. You got Eli Manning, who I think is going to be on the tail end of his career pretty soon. He is 36. You do have Odell Beckham Jr., who has been considered one of the top receivers in the league, even though I think he's kind of really inconsistent from fantasy and reality football standpoint. But I actually would like to see this for a couple of reasons. I do think it gives Adrian Peterson a chance to contend for a Super Bowl, and I do think that Adrian Peterson could be even more valuable in fantasy than he would be last year. Last year, that offensive line has a lot of problems, and it showed in the running game.
Right.
This year, if he goes to the Giants, he's playing behind a really good quarterback. He's playing with some really good pieces in offense, and I do think that he can perhaps, still be really productive. I'm not going to say that he's going to be like, he's going to be the best running backs in the league again. I still think he can be really productive. He can. I know he didn't average, like, his yards per carry weren't really that good.
No.
But come on, I think he can average more than 3.3 than Rashad Jennings did last year. He can average more than what he did last year with this Giants team.
Well, so that's the thing. Yeah, you're basically assuming that even though Adrian Peterson had a bad year last year and he's going to be 32 years old, you're assuming he's one that can beat Father Time at least for a year or two, right? Because Rashad Jennings, 31 years old, not exactly someone who you could rely on going forward by any stretch. But you also have the situation with Adrian Peterson. He's a freak of nature, right? You're assuming he's going to come back, which maybe he can, maybe he can't. But he's the one person that you would probably bet on the most of anybody to do these kind of things, right? Because usually running backs by, 29, they're winding down, and by 30, they're done. He still had a good year when he was 30, Adrian Peterson, but you have to have the situation, at least in the back of your mind, to where it's just like, okay, 2014, he played a game, not for injury purposes, so that was other reasons. 2016, at age 30, came back, beast. 31, not the same. You got to hope he comes back and does the same thing. But like you said, Perkins, that would be a nice thing and something that might work out. But it's kind of unclear if he will be the guy. And you said Rashad Jennings, the one that was there, he was bad too. So it's not like you're bringing him in to replace Le'Veon Bell, right? You are hoping Perkins can do well, but the Giants as a running team, they didn't live up to expectations. Like, they didn't kind of do what you thought that they would do. And Paul Perkins, like you said, he might be the guy, but at the same time, he's still someone that, is unproven, basically.
Yeah, and he is. He is really unproven. He's going to in his second year. I do think we forgotten. I think we forgot to mention Chamberlain's name here. He's still a part of the Giants squad. Nice. So you got a potential squad of Adrian Peterson and Paul Perkins and Shane Vereen, so it looks like it can be productive. But the thing that Adrian Peterson does have against him is his age, his history, and his health. And, what I mean by his history, I do mean that he was suspended for 6 games for the personal conduct policy for his involvement in a child abuse case. So maybe the Giants might stay away from that because of what happened. The
Giants signed a kicker, kept a kicker that was domestically beating his. So I'm just saying, I
was getting to that. So it could make, the Giants organization were under scrutiny because of that. So maybe they might get away. But from a football standpoint and a fantasy football standpoint, Adrian Peterson is coming off a torn meniscus in his knee. And I think this was probably the worst year I've ever seen in Adrian Peterson. And he's 32. He's going to be 32 next month.
Right.
So that's aging for an NFL running back.
Sure.
But Adrian Peterson does have, this is what he has going for him. I do think, he's a freak of nature. We've seen him coming back from a torn ACL before. Probably had his best year after that. I think that was the year he was the MVP.
That's the year he had 2,000 yards, but also he was also 27 years old.
That was true. So it remains to be seen what Adrian Peterson and the Giants happen to do. And, Adrian Peterson, I think, is going to get some interest. I do think he might come cheap. I think he might come on a bargain. I think he's someone that you can sign for a 1-year deal, maybe 2-year deal.
Oh, yeah.
Around $3, $4, $5 million. But he is going to generate some interest. I can see him going to the Packers. I can see him going to the Giants. I do think that's a very big possibility. I do see him going to a team. I just can't see Adrian Peterson being a free agent. I just can't, unless he's retired. No, I don't. He'll
go to some team because he's so talented, or at least he was so talented. Who knows if he still is? He was so talented forever in the NFL with the Vikings that you can see a team just trying for a year, just saying look, let's see if we can make you into somewhat of what you were before. Because we all thought this year they'd come back and he'd be Adrian Peterson, because last year he had 1,400 yards, almost 1,500 yards, and he was still Adrian Peterson. He led the league in rushing and yards per game. He was somebody who, was a beast all of last year at 30 years old. And we're like, wow, okay, father time isn't a thing for him. Then he came back this year, and after game 1, then he got hurt and he was gone for a long period of time. Then he's like, oh, I'm going to come back at the end of the year and I'm going to, play. And I was like, wow, okay, he came back faster than we thought. And then he was bad in that game, and then he didn't play the last game of the season. So it was really something where he could just never get, his legs under him and basically play a full few games to get everything nice. But, you're just doing this off of hope now, right? That's all it is. You're basically hoping that he can channel a solid percentage, not be the guy, obviously, from 2009. That dude's not coming back. But be someone who, is able to help out, right, as far as running back goes. Because, like I said, you got Odell Beckham and Eli Manning who can kind of take the pressure off in that aspect, which he's never had before outside of when he had Brett Favre in 2009 when they went to the NFC Championship game. He's never really had someone to rely on. It's always been here, Adrian, carry the ball a bunch of times and bail us out. That's always been what it was for him. And now would be the first time since the Brett Favre years where he can actually not worry about okay, I got to go out and do this again. Okay, so I got how many people in the box? 8 in the box. Okay, that's going to suck. All right, let's go. He's actually going to be able to breathe a little bit easier with the people around him on offense.
Yeah, and the thing that is underplayed here is there's going to be depth
right
behind Adrian Peterson. So I don't think the Giants will run him 30 times a game.
No.
Or at least be making him a third down back. Because they do got Paul Perkins, who was productive. They got Shane Vereen coming back as well, who they see as a passing back.
Sure.
For this team. And this will probably be a really good talented team, probably the most talented team that Adrian Peterson could potentially play with. But I do want to say Adrian Peterson is still part of the Vikings organization. I do think we got to get that clear, is that he's still part of it. He has to be released. We're just speaking hypotheticals here.
Yeah.
So we're just saying eventually if he ever does become released. But it would be pretty fun. It would be pretty fun, honestly, from a fantasy standpoint, to see Adrian Peterson play for the Giants. All right, well, we're going to take our first break here, and we're going to discuss Tony Romo, Anthony. Because that's what we're going to do. I think we're going to talk about Tony Romo pretty much the entire offseason.
Probably.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about Tony Romo when we get back to the Goes to Me Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the Goes to Me Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And it looks like Tony Romo is expected to be released by the Dallas Cowboys, according to ESPN's Ed Warner. So he's not going to get traded. It looks like he's going to be released this offseason, and he will have his pick of which team he will play for, which And in a way, it's a good thing for Tony Romo. He gets to choose where he wants to play. He is going to be 37. He does want to play for a contender. I think Tony Romo still has a lot of talent left in the tank for him to play well. So Romo's contract actually kind of makes it difficult for him to trade. He did sign a 6-year, $119.5 million deal in 2013.
Right.
And when doing the quarterback with that salary and his injury history, and he's 37, so it will scare teams a little bit off a bit. And I know there's teams that really need a quarterback. You can say the Denver Broncos needs a quarterback to compete, but it looks like they're willing to stick with Trevor Siemian or Paxton Lynch, or both of them. It looks like Houston Texans will be the ideal fit for Romo, despite signing Brock Osweiler to that $72 million deal last year. So what we're going to do here is we're going to speculate which team we think he will sign. So, there's a number of NFL teams there. The Chicago Bears, they're expected to cut Jay Cutler. The Buffalo Bills, who I don't think they're going to stick with Tyrell Taylor there, especially with this $27 million option due next month. He's going to enter a very limited market here for quarterbacks.
Right.
Don't forget, there's also Jimmy Garoppolo, who I think is going to get traded as well. So there's multiple teams on there. The Chiefs, I think, can be a possibility.
But if you do that, then you have another situation where you have another quarterback who's available that a lot of people are going to want with Alex Smith.
Exactly. So that's one way. Broncos, I don't know. I just don't think the Broncos are still sold on Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch. I'm not buying that. I'm going to still put the Broncos on there. And I think the Texans are the perfect fit for Romo. So, honestly, I think the Bills are a fit too. I did say the Jets. I was very bold by saying that. I think the Bears.
You don't want the Jets.
No, I don't think he wants.
He doesn't
to play
want it.
I don't think he wants
for
to.
about you or the Jets fans, he doesn't want that.
No, and the Bears, I think, could be a possibility because you remember, Tony Romo did play at Eastern Illinois, so maybe that kind of is kind of a little bit of homecoming there. But it looks like the Bears are more interested in bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo there in the trade. So I would say, they're more likely to get Jimmy Garoppolo there. But, looking at all the teams that he can potentially go to, I actually like the Chiefs. And I know that they got Alex Smith there. But from a reality football standpoint, I think Alex Smith is really not a guy that scares a lot of teams. He's just been good enough to get them to the playoffs. I think Tony Romo couldn't get to be. I think he can be the guy that will get the Chiefs to the Super Bowl, because the Chiefs have been really good ever since Alex Smith was the quarterback.
Right.
But they haven't gone as far as the divisional round. They haven't went to the championship game with Alex Smith, and I just don't think Alex Smith's ever going to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And that hurts me to say. That hurts me to say because I am a 49er fan. I was a huge Alex Smith supporter even when he was in his bad years. And it hurts me to say that, but I just don't think he is. And I do think if Tony Romo goes to the Chiefs from a fantasy football standpoint, that bodes well for Jeremy Maclin, definitely Travis Kelce.
Right.
And you can't forget about Tyreek Hill. So I do think from fantasy standpoint, that would boost those players up so much. The Broncos, if he does go there, and the Broncos do happen to get some interest there, Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders are definitely second-round picks. And Houston Texans, DeAndre Hopkins would probably be a relevant fantasy receiver again. I know,
my boy.
I know that's your boy, and then maybe CJ Fedorowicz can get some play in there. Who's also your boy by default.
Different boy, but
yeah.
you have the situation with Romo. The Texans would probably be the best scenario for him, right? Because you have the situation where they're in a bad division, right? You basically just have to worry about the Colts, maybe the Titans, but the Jaguars are bad. They're going to be bad next year. It's not like they're going to all of a sudden be 10-6 next year. They're probably going to go 6-10 again because that's what they do. You have the situation where they already had the schedule released as far as who they're actually playing. They don't know the date of it, but they know the teams are playing. And with the Colts have the worst or the best record or best. The teams are playing are bad, and it'll be the same thing basically for the Houston Texans, except for 2 games because they're going to play the same division. You're going to play the same out-of-division players because you play 2 different divisions, right? So they're going to play the AFC North. They're going to play the NFC West. So that'll help out because you also get the Browns in the middle of that. You get the Niners in the middle of that. You get the Rams in the middle of that. So those are nice little wins for Tony Romo. And then if he can make it to the playoffs, then you can go from there. They have a really good defense. They're getting J.J. Watt back. I think that's probably the best scenario for him, both for a fantasy football perspective and just for a winning perspective of him being able to leave. Also, if that's the case, then you get the nice little added stuff of he's still in Texas, and you get to, basically fight for supremacy in the state of Texas against the Cowboys. And you get a scenario where if they're better than the Cowboys, like if the Cowboys decide to regress because all of a sudden they start to figure out, what Dak Prescott can do, and all of a sudden they go from 14 and was there 14-2? Yeah, I think
13-3.
13-3. If they all of a sudden go down to 9-7, and then the Texans, because they're in a bad division and they play bad opponents, all of a sudden go up to, we call it 12-4. Then all of a sudden Romo gets some bragging rights, even though he's still boys with, Jerry Jones. It's still a scenario where now he gets bragging rights and now Jerry Jones looks bad. So you get that little dynamic, and then I like that one the best because with Kansas City, you still got to face the Raiders, you still got to face the Broncos, you still got to face the Chargers with, they're not a good team, but you still got Phillip Rivers. And same thing if you go to Denver, you have to face other good teams. At least with the Texans, it's the easiest probably schedule, or at least easiest path for him, while also having a very talented player in DeAndre Hopkins and a good tight end in Fedorowicz to basically go forward. Even if you want to say something like the Bills, yeah, the Bills are great, but the Bills also have to face the Patriots all the time. That's going to be a nightmare. The Dolphins made the playoffs last year, and the Bills, maybe they're a good team, maybe they're not. Maybe, Tyrod Taylor wasn't as good as Romo is, but it's also a scenario where, the division's really good. The best thing I'd honestly say of all of the teams would probably be the Texans just because it's the easiest path.
Yeah, and I do think he's going to go there for that reason. He has an easy division, the best defense in that division.
That's getting Watt back.
That's getting J.J. Watt back. And don't forget, Jadeveon Clowney played lights out.
Whitney Merciless was really good for him, yeah.
So if Tony Romo goes to the Texans, this team is a Super Bowl contender. But from a fantasy perspective, this whole team gets better. I think DeAndre Hopkins will be back to being a relevant fantasy contributor.
Right.
I do think he will move up in drafts. I do think Will Fuller would be somewhat significant, even though he did struggle with drops. But I do think he's someone that will be targeted late in rounds. I do think CJ Fedorowicz will get some consideration and some value as well because he did pretty well with Brock Osweiler. But Tony Romo is a better quarterback, 10 times better quarterback than Brock Osweiler will ever be. And
that's the other thing you were basically assuming, myself included, by saying the Texans is that basically they just decided on Osweiler. Okay, yeah, never mind.
And I think they would.
Because he signed that 4-year, $72 million contract. One of those years is obviously already gone, but it's $37 million guaranteed. So if you average it out the 4 years, $72 million, it all of a sudden becomes $18 million a year, right? So that 18, let's just say it's average 18, like every year he gets 18, because sometimes they backloaded, front-loaded, whatever. Let's just say it's $18 million every year. So he's already 18 of the $37 million. So he's basically halfway done with his contract anyway. So it's a $19 million cap hit if they release him this year. Maybe they just keep him on the team as an insurance policy, basically. It's like, okay, Osweiler, you're going to stay. You're going to be the backup, though. And we're basically going to decide, Romo's going to be our starter. But if his back goes out again, which is totally possible, we're going to go back to you. Now, maybe he gets kind of in his feelings about that because it's basically the same thing that happened only with the back and the neck with Peyton Manning over in Denver. But again, $72 million, $37 million guaranteed. That tends to help your ego out a little bit if you're mad that you're not playing. And then after this year, if they cut him, then all of a sudden the cap hit's not as big. But this year you kind of have him as an insurance policy, and it's not something we haven't seen before. We saw Seattle where they had Matt Flynn. They signed him, and then they had Russell Wilson as a rookie, and they're like, oh, yeah, never mind, Matt, you're going to be on the bench. Never mind, we're going to go with this guy because we like him better. That's not out of the realm of possibility. It's just not as common because so much money is devoted to, the quarterback, and, you can't have, 2-3 quarterbacks making a bunch of money because that doesn't allow for other people on the team to get paid as well because it's a salary cap league.
Yeah, and in a way, it does hurt the Texans in a salary cap standpoint. But, I do think that is a real possibility, and I actually think the Texans would like to have Brock Osweiler as an insurance policy. He's a pretty good backup. He's shown in Denver that he can be a valuable backup. But when you have Tony Romo on your team, you need a good backup. Just look at what the Cowboys did. They drafted Dak Prescott. And, I do think the Cowboys are they're not going to go 13-3, but I do think there'll be 10 wins. And can you imagine, hypothetically, if the Cowboys were good again and the Texans happen to make the playoffs and they happen to meet the Super Bowl, Texas, Super Bowl, Houston versus Dallas. Can you imagine the storylines in that game?
Oh, that'll be if that actually does happen, the internet might actually break on that because you'll have Tony Romo, which the internet loves. You'll have Jerry Jones, which also the internet loves. And you'll be able to basically, you'll have the two of them the whole week just talking about oh, we're sorry that we let go of Romo, but we, decided to go with Dak Prescott. We thought it would be good. Okay, never mind. I was looking it up to see if it was actually in Jerry World.
No. Because
that would be even better. That would just be it's in Minnesota.
Yeah, it's in Minneapolis at the new at US Bank Stadium.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. But that would have been something to see this year.
Yeah.
But, we'll have to play the wait and see game with Tony Romo. It's going to be probably one of the funnest things to watch in this offseason. All right, well, we're going to take our last break here. When we get back, we're going to talk about Tom Brady. It looks like Tom Brady and the Patriots are working on a contract extension, so it makes it so Brady looks like he's got to play until his 40s there. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about that when we get back to the Golden State Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the Golden State Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, and for our final segment today, it looks like the New England Patriots and Tom Brady looks like they have mutual interest in a new contract or an extension, whatever you want to call it. But it looks like they want to get a new deal done. Jeff Howe, who is the Patriots beat writer for the Boston Herald, he said that he reported that Brady and the Patriots have expressed mutual interest in a new contract. He said there's nothing imminent. But Brady is set to receive just $1 million in cash earnings for 2017, and both sides kind of want to reward, pretty much want to reward the guy that brought him back from a 25-point comeback. So It looks like they want to do that. And Jeff Howe went on is that Brady is signed through 2019 due to last year's extension, so it looks like they want to extend him even further. He just said to earn $1 million in cash. But also has a $14 million cap hit.
Right. We also remember what happened last year. You know why they restructured it?
Yeah. Well, inform me, recap why they restructured it.
Because Deflategate was gone for 4 games, so they basically decided to say, oh, yeah, for the first 4 games, you make $4. They decided to basically do that, but then get his money later on, so that way the Deflategate suspension wouldn't matter as much. And then this year, he's making $1 million, but he also has a $13 million signing bonus. That's according to Sport Track. And after this, then it's $14 million in 2018, 14 in 2019. So, yeah, they're going to basically restructure these whole things, everything like that, because, Brady obviously was the most valuable player on the team. Okay, cool, let's reward you a little bit. Instead of $1 million, let's make it a little bit more. The signing bonus is going to be 13, but let's kind of restructure this a little bit so that way we can keep you on the team and not necessarily keep you happy because, the dude's, one of the most well-paid quarterbacks. Also, he's not the highest money in his team or doesn't make the most money in his household. So that part doesn't matter to him as much, I would think. But, yeah, it's one of those things where considering that he was, basically in the MVP race for most of the year and he had the 25-point comeback in the fourth quarter, okay, cool, yeah. Let's basically reward you a little bit, not an excessive amount because, again, this is the Patriots and that's not what they do, but, let's take the $1 million and let's, make that a little bit higher, and then we'll kind of go from there. They're still in, the early talks of it. It's not like this whole thing is going to be done and all of a sudden Brady's going to go from making $1 million to making 12. They're still in the early talks of it, but at least it's something to where, they're obviously thinking about keeping him semi-long term because he's 40 years old, so long term, whatever. But still, it's not looking like they're going to do Patriots things, and all of a sudden you're going to read, on Monday, oh, Tom Brady was traded. Wait, what?
That would. Can you imagine if that hypothetically that happened?
Honestly.
The internet would go insane.
I could imagine just because it's the Patriots. Now, it would be surprising also. I can be both shocked and think about it and be like, I guess that makes sense. But yeah, for them, and this is what they do, but at least with him, he seems to be the one exception to that rule.
Well, Brady did say he doesn't want to play for another coach, so I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
I think if they did cut him, he might play with another team, but then again, he's got 5 rings, and he can probably just be like, all right, look, man, I'm out.
Just go out on top.
Yeah,
just go out on top.
Because there's been reports that Giselle's basically been on and basically saying, stop playing. You don't have to play anymore. You're good. Stop doing this. And he's like, yeah, that's fine. I'm still playing.
Yeah.
But it's one of the things. Probably it's just why do you keep playing? Why is it something that you continually want to do? Everyone's calling you the GOAT. Everyone's saying you're great. You don't have to keep coming back to play. And Brady's just one of those ultra crazy competitive people. There's just yeah, that's fine. I still want to play. I still want to beat Roger. Who's Roger Goodell? Why do you want to beat him? Spygate, I got suspended. This is stupid. I don't want to do this to Flagate. Now I get this stuff. No. He's ultra competitive, and he's going to want to play till he's 45. Will that happen? Probably not, because name a quarterback that played till 45 that was good. And we're talking about good because Patriots, if they're bad, they'll cut you, and they'll do that to Brady eventually if he's not what he is now. Because if he'd have been the first half Brady for the whole game, then I don't think he gets this restructuring of the contract. It's the second half where he came back and was amazing that got him this restructured deal.
Yeah, and definitely, that comeback really is playing a huge part in this. So we're going to talk this from a fantasy football perspective because this is the Fantasy Football Podcast. So what does this do for Tom Brady's fantasy value and the people around him? Because, they got some free agents. Martellus Bennett is going to be a free agent. I think they're going to let him walk because, Gronk is going to be back. So it looks like Gronk's fantasy value is going to be really high because of Martellus Bennett not going to be there. But if Gronk stays healthy, he's definitely going to – I think he can be the top tight end again. But he does have some competition this year with Travis Kelce, Jimmy Graham, and a lot of other guys. And Julian Edelman, that's his boy, Tom Brady. Tom Brady's his boy. They have a bromance going on. So, Julian Edelman's value is not going to be diminished. So it looks like the value would be the same. And, for the running back position for the Patriots, they always find ways to make guys successful. Like James White, all of a sudden he's on talk shows now because of his game-winning touchdown. In the Super Bowl, he was on Conan, he was on Jimmy Fallon. So, he's on talk shows now. And this is a guy that was in a part-time position.
Look, man, you talk about what will Brady do from a fantasy perspective. I mean, Brady's still going to be a top 5 quarterback in the league because now he's going to play all 16 games. He made James White into basically some Jerry Rice-looking dude in the Super Bowl. He made Chris Hogan look like,
he made him look like Hulk Hogan.
It made him look, like Hulk Hogan in his prime. Yeah. He made him look like Julio Jones. He had the same receiving game as Julio Jones. He made basically, LeGarrette Blount, who got cut from the Steelers because he was basically smoking too much weed, made him into an 18 touchdown running back. The whole team is basically interchangeable parts with Tom Brady. He's gone from Deion Branch, Troy Brown, people like that, to Randy Moss, which obviously Randy Moss is an exception to the rule. Wes Welker had 1 touchdown when he was in Miami, and then he got to New England and got all these, receiving yards, all these receptions and touchdowns. Then all of a sudden, Amendola, Edelman, Hogan, James White, all these people that come around. It doesn't matter who they surround him with. As long as he trusts them, he's going to have a really good season with them. So this is just basically allowing him to basically get a little bit more money. it's not going to hinder the team as far as being able to sign the players, because if all of a sudden Martellus Bennett wants to get more money somewhere else, fine, we'll find another tight end to pair with Gronk, or else we'll just have Gronk come back and hopefully he can play a full season. If somebody else on the team wants to get paid more money, that's fine. We'll just take this 5th-round running back who decided to, instead of playing lacrosse, like all of a sudden, oh, no, I played hockey, now I just want to play football. Cool, Pro Bowl for you. Like, it's not going to matter. It's Tom Brady.
Yeah, exactly. So no matter what, it looks like the fantasy value of the Patriots on the offensive side of the ball, it looks like pretty much isn't going to change as long as Brady plays on the high level.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much. But when we look forward to next year, who knows who's going to do what? Like, I am expecting a huge year from Gronk because it is Gronk.
Right.
I'm expecting a solid year from Edelman, and we saw the targets that he drew. It was like it was insane. Like,
yeah, that's the thing. You can expect
it was like 158 targets.
Yeah, like there's a couple of things. Like, yeah, you don't know who's necessarily going to be, the greatest on the team because it can be in flux sometimes. But Tom Brady's going to be doing well. Even though he's 40 years old, you assume he's still going to be Tom Brady-like because he's probably still going to be motivated to do things because he doesn't want to basically just, end the whole Deflategate. He's going to be mad about that for the rest of his life probably. Julian Edelman, he's not too old of a player. He's basically 30 years old. He's going to be 31 by the time the season starts, and he had 98 receptions last year, and he's probably going to get some more around that again. LeGarrette Blount may be gone, but they'll probably find another running back to fit that whole situation. And Gronkowski's, assuming he doesn't get hurt, will probably get somewhere around 1,000, 1,200 yards and about 14 touchdowns.
Yeah, so, nothing's going to change for the Patriots. That's all we're saying.
Not too much.
From a fantasy standpoint. It's the middle of February, and we just need the content, folks. It's a good combo, though. But that's going to conclude our show, Anthony. It's going to conclude it.
Yep.
And I will be back on Tuesday.
You will be back. I'll be back on Friday.
Yeah, like every week. And that's going to conclude our show, guys. I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to the Going to Me Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Anthony.
And I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in.